Hi, everybody. It's Mama Kay coming at you from her home studio again in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And I'm really excited to have this next person here as our guest today. They have such incredible insights as what it means to be involved in music education on a variety of different levels. So, without further ado, special guest, who are you?
Well, hi everyone. Thanks for having me on. This is really exciting, and I've watched a number of the videos now, so I just consider it an honor to be interviewed for this series. And welcome to our new reality of doing everything from home. So my name is Brent Johnson. I'm the Education and Community Engagement Manager at the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. So that's my main job, and then I do a number of other things in the music community as well. I've been working for the International Music Camp in a variety of capacities for about 20 years now. Currently, I'm the Canadian representative and also the chair of the Canadian board. And yeah, I volunteer with a number of community organizations as well.
So, music really is your life.
It is, yeah.
And your wife is a music teacher as well.
My wife is an elementary music educator in the Winnipeg School Division. Yep. And we're working both from home now, which has been kind of an interesting adjustment, but I'm enjoying it as well.
We're all having to get a little bit more creative.
Right, yeah.
So let's go way, way, way back to baby Brent. Way back when you first started to get into music, take us through your journey. How did you, like, from elementary school, even before, all the way up until you went into university? What was that like? What was your journey?
Sure. Well, so I started, like I think a lot of people probably do. My parents started me on piano lessons when I pretty much was literally a baby. I think my very first couple of years were actually in the Yamaha program in South St. Vital, which was kind of a group setting. I have kind of foggy memories of that period of time, but and then from there I went on to study with a couple different piano teachers in our neighborhood, and never really quite clicked for me, unfortunately. And so heading into grade 7, now I was in the French immersion program in the former Fort Garry School Division. Heading into grade 7 at École Viscount Alexander, I struck a deal with my parents that if I, practiced and did well in band, that I could discontinue the piano lessons at the start of grade 7. At the time, that seemed like a really great decision because I wouldn't have to practice piano anymore, which I found kind of boring, to be honest. In hindsight, and so at that time, I thought I would be taking over the family farm or something along those lines for a profession. So piano didn't seem to be a terribly necessary thing. In hindsight, that's probably one of my biggest regrets, piano lessons at that point. Man, I wish I had continued with them, and I would now have a much better proficiency on the keyboard. I mean, I can still play, but not at a very high level. So I'm enjoying, my son is actually in his second year of taking piano lessons now, and I'm really enjoying kind of going on that adventure with him. And although I can see he's quickly going to catch up to me in terms of my keyboarding skills. So I struck a deal with my a saxophone, actually, right from the very beginning. And this is a bit of a funny story. You interviewed Trish Howe not too long ago. I watched her interview yesterday. And that was when I first met Trish, actually, was at band instrument trials. Trish was running the trials, I think, for Long and McQuaid at the time. And Ginny Helmer was my first band director. So I went in there knowing that I was really interested in saxophone. So they let me, well, first Trish had me try a tuba, actually, because I was a big kid. So, gotta try to funnel kids a certain amount. And, but I just didn't really interest me. So, and that was at the first trial, I think, when they came to our elementary school. The second trial, when we actually went to Viscount in the evening and tried instruments there, I marched right in there and said, I'd like to try a saxophone. So they handed me an alto sax, and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. Do you have anything bigger? I said, okay. So they handed me a tenor sax. I was like, oh, this is all right. Do you have anything bigger? And at that point, Ginny kind of looked at me and said, well, you are a big kid. We don't normally start students on this instrument. And she had to, you know, pull the Barry sax out of the corner and slapped a reed on it. And I tried that and I said, yeah, this is what I want to play. So I started on Barry right from the very beginning, and just loved it. I didn't actually play anything else until I got into high school, when I started to diversify, at first into some alto, I think in jazz band, and then some tenor. And at some point, I think maybe in early university, I even got my hands on a soprano sax from Elmwood High School. They have actually a really old Mark VI soprano. It was in kind of rough shape because it hadn't been played in a long time. But it was in Connie Turner's. I used to help her out at the school there doing odd jobs as a university student. And yeah, when I found the soprano sax, I thought, oh, cool. So I started playing some soprano there as well. So yeah, mostly on Barry all the way through, up until high school. And it's still my true love.
And Trish really wasn't that far off with trying you out on tuba though first, right? Because aren't a lot of the lines quite similar that you would play?
Exactly. Yeah, I guess I love the low sounds. Although I've been playing tenor sax primarily now for probably about 15 years in the Winnipeg Wind Ensemble. I did play Barry my first couple years in the band, and then they needed a tenor player, so I made the switch there, and it just kind of has stuck. And so I've really come to enjoy playing all the inner harmonies and counter melodies and that kind of stuff on tenor as well. It's been really good for my ear.
So at what point did you know that you wanted to make music a career?
That took a while to come to that conclusion. I spent most of my high school career, if you want to call it that, being as involved in music as I could. And I want to credit all my band teachers for the encouragement and the positivity. And I think just for any educator out there, one of the things I really wanted to get through, message I wanted to get through today was, don't ever discount the power of asking a student a question or of encouraging them to do something that might be a bit out of their comfort zone. My grade 10 year at Vincent Massey, when Eileen Patterson was teaching there, she encouraged me to join the wind ensemble. And I didn't have the self-confidence to join the group at the time. It wasn't something I would have considered if no one had encouraged me to do it. So I started playing Barry sax in the wind ensemble, probably in the fall, I guess, of my grade 10 year, and just fell in love with it. I really enjoyed the challenge. I really enjoyed the opportunity to play with, because it was largely grade 11s and 12s in the group, I think. So it felt it was kind of scary, actually a lot scary now that I'm thinking about it a bit more, but also just really a really good challenge and really fun. And I liked that I could just play more. So I enjoyed that opportunity. But how did I get into music? Actually, my plan going out of high school, I'd kind of moved away from the family farm concept and towards computer science. And we actually had this really crazy English class in grade 12 of 32 students, 16 of which were Mexican exchange students. And it was actually the drama teacher, Miss Wilson, who was teaching this class. Drama was sort of her primary subject area. So it's kind of an unhinged group in a lot of ways, but a lot of fun. And we went to go see A Streetcar Named Desire at Manitoba Theatre Center for a class trip one evening. And I was up on the second level there, kind of people watching at intermission. And she walked up to me and just kind of struck up a conversation, asked how things were going. And one of her questions was, so what are you doing next year? And I paused and said, oh, well, I'm going to go into computer science. And she just looked at me right in the eyes. And she said, is that really what you want to do? If you could do anything, what would you do? And I just had this aha moment, oh my gosh, nobody's ever asked me that before. I said, well, if I could do anything, I'd teach band. So she says, well, why aren't you doing that? And again, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. For some reason, I hadn't really even considered that. She says, if that's what you want to do, that's what you should pursue. So I did. In the end, it was a bit too late to kind of switch gears and audition for music school. So I had never actually taken a private lesson on saxophone at this point in my life. So I got connected with Ross Ingstrup, who was the professor at the University of Manitoba at the time. And I did a university 1 year, taking as many music courses as I could as a non-major, and playing in as many ensembles as they would let me as a non-major, which is where I met Connie Turner, because she was directing the concert band at the time. And yeah, I did and studied with Ross for the year, and then I auditioned that spring, the year after I graduated high school, got into the School of Music, and on we went from there.
That's wonderful. And did you do the integrated program, or did you do the after degree for ed?
I did do the integrated program, although I definitely crammed 5 years into 8. Took a little bit of extra time along the way. There were a couple bumps in the road. You know, life has a way of happening, and
Yeah,
but
some of us just take the scenic route.
You know, in hindsight, I'm glad I took that extra time. It allowed me to do more playing than if I had just crammed everything into 5 years, and it allowed me to enjoy a lot of the university experience more. The integrated program, I'm actually glad that the integrated program doesn't exist anymore. There's a few good reasons for that, I think, but mainly it's just too much work in too little time. It's too intense. And yeah, I don't know. I really felt that a big part of the university experience for me was relationships, getting to know people, and you know, there's the hierarchies in the old music building. I don't know if it's the same now in the new building, but there were the loungers down in the basement, and I guess I kind of fit into that group here and there. And because I was on student council, tended to spend more time down in the gritty grotto in the basement there as well. And anyways, I'm just glad I had that experience to be able to play even more. One of the things I miss the most about my university experience is chamber music, quartet playing in particular, which I haven't had opportunity to do now for many years. But if I had the opportunity, that's probably one of the first things I'd love to try and restart.
It's interesting that you mentioned relationships as being really important to you during that time, because look what you're doing now, right? And through all of your music career, you base what you do on relationships. You thrive on the relationships you have.
For sure. Yeah, it's important, you know, the networking opportunities. And one of the really interesting things, and I don't think I would have figured this out if I hadn't taught band for a couple of years, as specialists, we all function in such relative isolation. You know, usually there's only one. You're lucky if you have maybe a part-time colleague at your school, but generally there's only one music educator. There's probably only one phys ed teacher in most school settings, and so you do something that's very different from all of your colleagues, and you don't have somebody in your immediate proximity that you can kind of lean on and converse with. And so all those networking opportunities are really important, to have that network of people that you can keep in touch with, you know, that are outside the walls of your building, that you can rely on and bounce ideas off of, and lean on when you need some support. And I will say that our music community here in Manitoba is just absolutely incredible for all of those things.
So have you found that things have just sort of built upon each other, from your involvement as a band teacher to then being involved with IMC and now with the WSO? Have those relationships sort of helped you go through each of those phases?
Absolutely. There's a lot of crossover. And I did spend a couple of years when I was between two different band teaching positions. I spent a couple of years at Long and McQuaid as a music ed consultant there. And again, I got to know so many teachers that I wouldn't have had the opportunity really to connect with otherwise through that position. And then when I moved on to the Winnipeg Symphony, my position there after my second band job, I brought all those connections with me, and it just really helped me stay in touch with all the educators out there.
Well, and they become your close friends too, right? It's not just at first they're people you meet, like you said, through your job, but then really Manitoba being what it is, those are our people.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a really big family. It's awesome.
Yeah, I know when I worked at St. John's for 3 years, I was there full time. The amount of connections that I made that way and what I learned was just, I would never give that up, and even on the hard days, right? the who you meet and what you learn
Yeah.
and just the skills, I still use them to this day.
Likewise, always. Yeah, it's
So
great.
what schools did you teach band at?
Well, I started in the River East Transcona School Division at John Pritchard School. I think I was half-time there teaching with Linda Thompson. I taught the grade 8 band and the jazz band and grade 6 exploratory band, which was a whole adventure, let me tell you. And then I was also at École Regent Park, I think .25, teaching grade 5 exploratory band and actually helping Chris Durazi out a little bit with his grade 6 band. I think I had 1 or 2 sections a week where I was in the classroom there helping out. And those were very different schools. So that was really interesting. And that was something that I really discovered during my practicum in university, actually, was geography doesn't necessarily correlate to similar school experiences. My first practicum was in Louis Riel School Division at Highbury and Minnetonka with Stuart Smith. And those schools are only 5 minutes apart, but man, they are night and day. And that was really eye-opening to me. I guess I lived a bit of a sheltered educational life in the schools that I had gone to, and it kind of opened my eyes to very different school cultures. And yeah, so at École Regent Park, that was a French immersion school, still is. So I had opportunity there to use my French language skills. And actually, I interviewed against my wife for that job, and I think I got the job mainly because I'm the fluent French speaker in the household. So that was a little bit of a tense early marriage moment. But she ended up landing a really great job, and that kind of set her elementary education career in motion. But yeah, that was interesting. And I just loved working with Linda Thompson at John Pritchard School. She just exudes enthusiasm and energy and positivity. Master motivator. That's the first time I'd heard that term used. And boy, is she ever a master motivator. So that was just really inspiring. And she was really patient with me as a very green, straight out of university first year teacher.
Turns out one of our phys ed teachers at Leland North, that was her band teacher as well. And she still
really?
so highly of her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I still keep in touch with Linda. We bump into each other a couple times a year at different events and things. And it's always really fun to reconnect. Her kids were really little back then, and now they're like driving and, young adults. It's kind of weird. Yeah, so from there I went to Long and McQuaid for a couple of years, and then my second band teaching opportunity was in Gimli, actually. I taught band at the high school and at the middle school in Gimli. Originally, I was hired, I think, on a 3 or 4 month term. We were living in East Kildonan at the time. I thought, okay, I can commute, from September to December. That's all right, and then I'll find something else in the city here. And one thing led to another. It ended up getting extended till the end of the year. And there were other teachers that commuted from the city, but man, I found that challenging. We had 7:30 jazz band 4 mornings a week. So it was really early starts. And then on the 5th morning, on Fridays, we had an 8 o'clock staff meeting before school started. So there was no relenting in the early mornings.
So you were getting up at probably 4:30 or 5 o'clock.
Four most mornings. Out the door at 6:15 at the latest, usually
That's
a bit earlier if I could. Yeah, it was. I just found it tiring. I was constantly tired, and this was before we had kids even. I just found it that commute really drained me. So my heart goes out to anybody who has a commute like that. But what a neat community. I really loved getting to know the community in Gimli and the students there. I still keep in touch with some of my former students. They've all graduated now, a couple of years ago even, my youngest students. And but yeah, just a lovely place. And so I enjoyed the opportunity to get to know folks there. And yeah, I just enjoyed my experience there very much. But it was a term position. So coming out of that, and Karen was teaching in the Winnipeg School Division that year. We found out we were expecting in January of that year. So it kind of set in motion a race to see who could land a job or something a bit more permanent for the following year. And Karen won. She got a permanent position in Winnipeg School Division, because we were trying to decide, like, what are we going to do? Do we buy a house halfway in between and then we're both commuting? Do we commit to living in the city? Do we, you know, it was very uncertain. And then with a child on the way, it added to the stress of kind of not knowing.
Right. You would have had to have bought a house probably in Selkirk.
Yeah, we were looking at like Selkirk or Lockport, or yeah, something kind of halfway-ish. And not a lot of job opportunities for elementary music educators in that part of like in Gimli at all, or in, you know, so really Karen was looking at teaching in the city. And so anyways, nothing was ideal. So I kind of took a leap of faith and decided to commit to finding something in the city. And with looking down the barrel of first baby on the way and whatnot. And that's when I actually applied for a different job at the symphony at first, just in the box office. But I was a day late in applying. I didn't catch the job posting till after it closed. So I tried sending it in anyways, never heard anything. And then about a month later, there was another opportunity available there. It was also a 4-month term. I seem to have a thing for starting things with 4-month terms, sounds like. My predecessor, Tanya Dirksen, was taking a leave to finish her MBA, and they were hiring somebody to kind of keep the programming going while she was on leave. And so I applied for that and got that job and started so that would have been in August of 2011 when I started at the WSO. And one thing led to another. We had baby, and suddenly I realized, oh my goodness, I have 2 months of employment left. We have a newborn, we have a mortgage, better start hunting again. And I actually ended up being hired as the general manager of the Winnipeg Jazz Orchestra, which was a half-time position. So I did that starting in October of 2011. And the WSO ended up keeping me on. They created a position for me, a half-time position, so that I could continue to do my work at the WSO and then with the jazz orchestra. So I did that for about 3.5 years. And when we were expecting our second child, you know, I was finding it really difficult to balance the two jobs. The demands were pretty high. Neither one was we all know, anybody who's itinerant knows that whatever percentage they put on paper is far from the reality. And that's kind of how I felt too. I was in this dichotomy of working from home half time and then working in the symphony office half time and getting a lot of parking tickets because I could never leave on time. And so the opportunity came about for me to take on the full-time position at the WSO as education manager. And although I was really sad about leaving the jazz orchestra because I loved all the connections I made in the jazz community through that position. And I learned a lot about not-profit organizational management and fundraising and all kinds of things. The opportunity at the WSO just seemed perfect. And so I've been full-time there now for about, I think 5.5 years, something like that.
Well, you are amazing at your job. I just have to say a huge thank you for the opportunities you've given my students over the years, kids that had never even set foot in the concert hall. It's been life-changing for a few of them. I know it's meant the world. So thank you for making that happen for my kids and for kids all across the city.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure. And that's exactly what I love about my job at the WSO. It's all about connecting people of all ages with music and about creating exceptional musical experiences that they probably wouldn't have otherwise. And just getting folks excited about classical music so that they'll want to come back and experience it some more and explore it some more.
So what are things like for you now with this new work life that we have? What does your job look like for the WSO?
Well, it's been kind of interesting. I was laid off. The entire symphony staff and musicians were laid off briefly about 2 weeks after all the lockdowns and quarantining happened. I mean, the orchestra business, I'll quote my executive director, Trudy Schroeder, the orchestra business is precarious at the best of times, which is so very true. I mean, really true of any not-for-profit arts organization. But with the symphony, it's particularly challenging because there's a large payroll. And it just limits I think to a degree the flexibility and the resilience of an organization when there's that many people involved. But yet at the same time, an orchestra is just the most amazing thing. And so it was kind of a shock when we were laid off. I thought maybe it would happen. I didn't think it would happen quite as quickly as it did. So we were kind of scrambling. We had about, I don't know, 8 or 9 days of notice and and we didn't know when we'd be back. So we were trying to get as much done for next year as possible before the layoff began. And thankfully, WSO has been able to qualify for the federal wage subsidy program. So they've now brought everybody back, including the orchestra, at 75%. So now I'm working from home. This is day 2 of being back and working from home and just doing a lot of planning for next year. I've had some meetings with a lot of my counterparts from across Canada already, just discussing what are things that we can do in this new reality. How can we support educators with the resources that we have? How can we adapt them to be available online? How can we adapt them so that students can continue to have musical experiences? I think one of the really neat things that's going to come of this whole pandemic scenario, particularly in the orchestra world, is it's forcing a shift towards digital that has been desired but not possible for a long time. There are some orchestras that are really well connected that way. I don't know if folks out there, if you haven't connected with the Detroit Symphony, for one, or even Toronto, there's a lot of orchestras that are now making content available online. The Berlin Philharmonic, their digital concert hall is free right now. There's so many great concerts on there that you can check out. I've listened to a lot of Mahler since this whole pandemic set in because it's available online and for free. And I mean, what's more broody and angsty and majestic than Mahler?
Well,
And I've been through all of those moods.
I've really been enjoying the Facebook page, The Musicians of the Winnipeg Symphony.
Yeah.
That's been a really, really cool insight into the players, right? I mean, you don't really get that up close and personal with them. So I'm hoping that more and more people are going to watch that and then hopefully again grow a bigger audience.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the challenging things about a really large organization like an orchestra. I mean, we've got 67 of the most talented and amazing musicians, but they're on the stage and you're, seated way back in a 2,300 seat auditorium somewhere, and you don't really feel that close necessarily to the people on the stage. And so for orchestras, that's one of the biggest challenges, to break down that barrier, somehow find a way to shrink that gap and connect people together. And because of all the different digital things that are happening now, a lot of those barriers have even disappeared, really. You can connect directly with musicians. I've been enjoying, there's just so many different little chamber music things that are being put up online now, and musicians posting things from their living room, like Jan Kochman, I think you mentioned it in one of your earlier interviews, playing from his living room and putting it up on YouTube. And
yeah, well, he was my first teacher at university, and
yeah.
I didn't learn that piece originally from him, but I had relearned it with him when I was there, and so that's why I made my recording of it too. So yeah, neat to have him, see him do that.
Yeah, and just recently, our principal horn, Patty Evans, and our principal trombone, Steve Dyer, they're both involved in the Canadian National Brass Project. Usually that's a summer project for them. But they've recently released a recording done through, I don't know, the a cappella app or whatever, where they've all recorded from their homes and then stitched it together. And they just put that out through the Musicians of the WSO Facebook page, I think a couple days ago. So definitely encourage you to check that out. Yeah, it's a neat one.
Very neat. So now I think you're going to have some wonderful words of advice here to anybody, any kids who might be thinking about going into music as a career. What are your special nuggets of wisdom that way?
Well, I think number one is don't be afraid of a challenge. Don't be afraid to take a leap. That's something I've had to do a number of times over my career, and it's always paid dividends for me. in opening a door to a new opportunity, to meeting new people who've provided me encouragement and support. So yeah, don't be afraid. Just do what you love, uh, and life will be great.
And how about any extra just worldly bits of wisdom for people in these weird times? It doesn't even have to be musical. Anything maybe that you're leaning on right now to sort of help propel you through these times.
Well, again, connections with people. Stay in touch with folks. I mean, things like this. These interviews are great because you can get to know people in a new and deeper way. I mean, so that's really interesting. I think also we have to look forward. We have to keep ourselves looking forward to the things we know will come back and the things that we love, but that we're missing dearly right now. I know I'm missing live concerts of all kinds, and one of my true loves. I mentioned the International Music Camp earlier in the interview. We've had to make the difficult decision to cancel camp for this summer, or to postpone camp until next year, and that's really tough because I love that place. But it will be there in 2021, and so just make plans. You know, when we are finally able to emerge from our living rooms and basements or wherever you spend time in your house, support those organizations. Get out there, go have those experiences. They're going to need your support, but they will be there for you as well. And,
it's almost like this time can be our planning. This is our great planning time. Look ahead, like you said, plan, research, get to know, and try something new.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we've got this gift of time that maybe we might never otherwise have in our lifetimes. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what comes of it. I will say, being pandemic quarantined with young kids is very draining. So we also have to be kind to ourselves and to each other, but to ourselves, and kind of manage expectations. I know at first I thought I was going to paint the entire house and fix all the cracks in our 120-year-old plaster, and I've slowly been tempering those expectations. And now that I'm back to work, that changes things again. But yeah, I think we have to be kind and know that, yes, we have this gift of time, but we also have to be reasonable with expectations on ourselves, because everything we're experiencing right now is just extra draining and stressful in ways that we don't even really understand of ourselves yet.
Exactly. Well, thank you for taking time to talk to me today. This has been wonderful. I never get a chance to sit with you and just chat, and you're even more incredible than what I already thought. So thank you
Oh
for
dear.
being so creative in what you do, and you are really resilient.
Well, thank you. You're far too kind. But I love what I do, and I just encourage everyone out there to seek out live music in whatever form that takes right now and in the future.
Brent, have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much again for spending time.
Thanks. You as well, Joanne. Take care.
Bye.